Greetings, town meeting members, town officials, and members of the public. My name is Jason Molina, and I'm speaking on behalf of a ballot committee named Community Preservation Shrewsbury, and we are the petitioners of Article 30. Article 30 is a proposal to adopt the Community Preservation Act in Shrewsbury, and it allows communities who adopt it to establish funds dedicated for recreation, open space, historic preservation, and affordable housing. We propose adopting CPA with local funding of 1% on the real estate tax bill, and including allowable exemptions made available through the CPA legislation. And we propose letting the voters decide whether they can support it this November. If there's a desire to adjust or revoke CPA in the future, it can be done through town meeting and ballot referendum. In terms of the project opportunities that could become available with CPA funds, here are some examples, certainly not limited to, and folks who have interest in making these happen can raise project proposals to do so. In terms of recreation, we have heard the need to rehabilitate overdue school and neighborhood playgrounds, including to make them ADA compliant. We've heard the need to rehabilitate existing softball, baseball, and lacrosse fields, including adding irrigation, shade shelters, and lighting. Some folks in our community have sought the need to create a dog park, and others would like to see additional walking and bike trails, including to make them unified across properties to make them longer. In terms of open space, we could restore ponds and lakes plagued with invasive weeds. Now, we're already paying for invasive weed control on the municipal side, but here's an opportunity to use CPA funds and not municipal funds so that we could make a little bit of monies available on the municipal side for other priorities. We could also, with CPA funds, acquire land if it were available that directly impacts our public water supply. And we could also acquire properties that become available for sale that fit into our strategic plans. So think about any large parcels in our community that if they became available, if that was part of our plans to purchase them so that they are used for open space or recreation needs in the future. On the historic preservation side, we could preserve qualifying historic buildings and artifacts. We also are aware of the need to restore historic gravestones in our community. Many of them have either started to tip over or some of them have broken. We also see the need to preserve and digitize historic town records. And on the affordable housing side, we could be creating low-income senior or veteran housing, as an example. We could also acquire and repurpose historic structures and convert them to affordable housing units. And finally, we can make some progress towards adding additional housing stock, affordable housing stock that is, to fulfill our minimum threshold for 40B and making affordable housing on our terms, not somebody else's. In general, what can CPA fund? So across the top of the categories that I mentioned earlier, and the left-hand side are the project proposal action verbs that are called out specifically in the legislation, such as acquiring, creating, preserving, support, rehabilitate, and/or restoring particular projects. Now, CPA is not new. It has been around since 2000, and to date, 177 communities, or basically over half of Massachusetts, has adopted CPA, including these comparable towns. For example, Grafton, Medway, Northborough, and West Boylston. And a number of other communities are also seeking to adopt CPA this November, including Franklin. Regarding how CPA is funded, again, we propose that local funding through the 1% surcharge on the real estate tax bill. And by adopting CPA, it also unlocks matching state funds. Communities that adopt CPA receive a variable annual matching distribution from the statewide Community Preservation Trust Fund. Now, we have already been paying into that state trust fund through transactions at the Registry of Deeds without getting the benefits as a community. Regarding the cost of property owners, this table in front of you shows the samples of property values and what their CPA surcharge would be. And there is an allowable exemption that for the purposes of calculating CPA surcharge, you can see in that middle column there, would reduce the value of your home for that surcharge calculation. So the average single family property value coming in at $478,603 minus the $100,000 valuation calculation would present a $47.21 surcharge for that particular property value. And that's, again, $47 for the year, or in other words, $12 per quarter. Now, there are exemptions that we're proposing to include that are available through the CPA legislation, including exempting qualifying low-income property owners. In the table in front of you is an example of what those thresholds are. And also low to moderate income senior property owners. Again, different table for that population. Applicants apply annually, and existing tax exemptions are not impacted. Now, with all the monies coming in from that local surcharge, we're estimating to generate over $500,000 annually. And then when you add on top of the annual valuable match, those two monies together become available for our CPA projects that folks would seek to raise. And again, adopting CPA would enable Shrewsbury to receive that distribution from the state fund. Now, when we talk about the state funds, it can be a sizable amount of money over time. So if we look at this chart here, we can see in comparison to other towns where we stack up. On the left-hand side, we see that Shrewsbury has not received any money from that CPA statewide trust fund. But other communities that have adopted CPA have collected a sizable amount of money. Norwood has adopted CPA in 2018, and they've collected so far $261,000. But when we look down the line, Hudson, for example, in 2008, to date, they've collected $1.4 million. And Northborough, adopting in 2006, they've collected $2.3 million from the state. So if we look at if Shrewsbury had adopted CPA previously, last year alone, the state trust fund could have contributed $115,000 based on that sample of $500,000 from the monies that we would have contributed on our local front of it. But of course, over time, these monies do add up, and they can be sizable for a lot of projects that we're seeking to, that folks would seek to propose. And in terms of that project approval process, community groups, residents, town departments, basically our community can raise a project proposal, and those proposals are sent over to a new committee called the Community Preservation Committee, or CPC. And the charge of that committee is to review those project proposals, making sure that they are allowable based on the use table that I showed earlier, and that we have monies available to fund those projects, and prioritize them if there are many proposals. If a project proposal seeks to draw on monies that are larger than what are available in the CPA trust fund accounts, CPA monies can be bonded to allow for a larger purchase. Let's say if it was a purchasing of lands that became available, we could do that through a bond based on CPA monies alone. And then those project proposals come out of CPC and go to town meeting for their approval like normal, because it's a funding allocation and to resort to accounts and also project proposals to be funded. And in terms of who would be on the Community Preservation Committee, or CPC, it would consist of a proposed 9-member board. Now, there are some statutory requirements of 1 member each from the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, Historic Commission, Housing Authority, and Parks and Cemetery Commission, and an additional 4 members at large, which are optional members. Now, the ballot committee would seek a bylaw if town meeting and the ballot referendum this November are successful. And so that bylaw would define the CPC, and we would have input on, from various, town boards and others who have interest in this bylaw before we bring it to town meeting for a vote. So in summary, what we're asking for is a yes vote for the Community Preservation Act. We know that CPA was enacted in 2000 and it continues to pay out. CPA enables us to follow through on strategic plans that we already have, and those were community-sourced priorities, such as the open space and recreation plans and surveys. The master plans of 2001 and 2016, elements within them call out the need for adopting more open space and recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing. And then housing production plans of 2012 and 2019, they call out explicitly to look at adopting CPA to benefit housing production. In terms of the effective date, keep in mind that this would not go into effect until July 1st of next year, and hopefully that is well after the effects of COVID in our community. So in summary, once again, we are looking for your yes vote to allow the voters to decide if Shrewsbury should adopt CPA on November 3rd. Now, also, this concludes our slides for the town meeting presentation, but it's important to note that in your mail, along with your town meeting packet, came a letter that came from our ballot committee. And it's important to bring this with you in addition to the town meeting packet, because in this envelope are the slides for this presentation and frequently asked questions in terms of deliberation regarding Article 30. So bring them together with you and you'll be all set for town meeting. Thank you for your time and consideration. If you have any further questions, please make sure to reach us at communitypreservationshrewsbury.org. Thank you very much.